Leadership law number 2, the law of influence, episode 108, the Do Hard Things Today podcast. Continuing our leadership series as we go through the book John C. Maxwell penned, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Last week we talked about the law of the lid and how leaders are the problem and they are the solution. Today we jump into the next law, and this law is called the law of influence. And that law of influence is the very first one that we come to after the law of the lid because of how important it is. And it says the true measure of leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. You know, I've heard it said, what does a leader look like and how do you determine if you're a leader? Best way I can describe that, I had a guy tell me, he said, well, just look behind you. Is anybody following you? If nobody's following you, then you're not a leader. Maybe you've been given the title of a leader, but if nobody's following you, then you're really not doing that. So what does a leader look like and how do we determine that? And the word that Maxwell uses is influence. And it's not a popularity contest. It's not who's the most dynamic. It's not who maybe has a title that is able to tell people what to do. That does not make you a leader. It's about influence. How are you really affecting people? And one of the things we'll talk about at the end of this is how are you adding value to others? So when you think about the word influence and how that works with leadership, what do you two guys, what do y'all think? What do you think about when you say that word influence and how the context of leadership interacts with that?
I think a lot of it. I think it's a broad picture. I think influence can be a lot of things. It's not just who you know. It's not just what you know. It's not just anything. It's a wide variety of different things. But I think the way it translates to leadership is if you see somebody that's well respected, if you see somebody that is an expert in their field. I'm going to use an example. Former Dorman football coach Dave Gutshaw is the smartest person about football that I have ever met. Further than that, he knows more about his field of subject, which is football, than any person I've ever met knows about their field of subject. Yep. That's a leader, and it translated into the things he did, into the people that he coached, into the people that he surrounded himself with. To me, somebody like that, someone who is... A lion doesn't have to tell you he's a lion. Somebody who's influential doesn't have to tell you they're influential. Yep. You can look at them and see the influence.
The first thing that comes to my mind is how are you making people better? How are you making them better, not only at their job, but in their personal life as well? Just overall, how are you influencing them to be better people?
Yeah, because all around. People want to be better. I mean, I think we all want to be better. And how are the people that I'm interacting with rubbing up against making me a better person? Because it's not, there's this difference when we talk about leadership. Authority and leadership are two different things. They're two completely different things. You can have authority. You can have the ability to make somebody do something. And that will work for a while where you give out mandates and tell you do this, this, and this. But that is a different thing than influencing somebody to lead. We talked a little bit last episode about management and how management and leadership are two different things. When you think about, and I'm going to put you on the spot because Bonnie, you are, and I have changed the names of these things where we have had store managers inside of our business before. Now they're store leaders. They are the leaders of that store. In your quick estimation, what's the difference between a manager and a leader?
A manager is pretty much just going to go in and tell everybody what to do that day. All right, this is what you've got going on. This is what you're going to do. And there is some of that every day. How
has that worked for you in the past? Because you have fallen into those traps in the past.
I have. Not well. It would get done, and it would get done to an acceptable level, but you could tell that the people in the store weren't necessarily happen. They were just coming to work every day, doing what they had to do, and go home.
And after they would get done with exactly what you told them to do, what would you be needing to do?
Tell them what else I needed them to do.
Yeah. Here's the next thing.
Here's the next thing you have to do.
So I've also observed you as you've grown as a leader of your people. How have you started leading your people?
Well, one of the things is empowering them to make their own decisions for what needs to be done in the store. I have one team member who's been there, I think, 15 years next month. And when she started, it was, this is what you're doing today. This is what you're doing today. This is what you're doing today. And it has been a hard transition for her, for me to say, you don't have to come to me with every little thing and ask me what you need to do. You know what needs to be done. Go out there and do it. Lead the people out there doing the things. Tell them what you need them to do. Y'all work together as a team. Figure out how the floor needs to be set. Y'all can manage that without me having to tell you to do it. And then when she does it well, be like, oh my God, that looks great. Y'all have done a great job with that. Keep up the good work. And it's been a very big transition for her specifically.
Oh, and when we talk about leadership, I've talked about three things. When I talk about our leadership team, there's three pillars of leadership that we believe in our company. And these are three things. The first one being empowerment, where we're empowering people to be everything they can be. We're giving them the resources, giving them the training. And then encouragement, which is that piece where we're catching people doing things right, where it's not, you don't want to be the kind of leader, which I would argue this is not leadership, the kind of manager who is just always catching you doing something wrong. You ever had somebody work for that just always the only thing they do is catch you doing things wrong.
Yep.
And they never encourage you. And that makes you feel beat down. I would argue that leadership it's not about that authority. It's about inspiration. You're inspiring others. You're empowering them. You're building the energy and morale. And leadership is going to be more mission driven and growing others rather than managing others to get where people can become. If you're in management, and everybody who's been in some kind of middle management, upper management, what is it? You can fall into the trap of whatever it takes just to get things done. And then people become they just become like an asset in your company, that they're just like a machine. And I'm going to get everything I can out of them. And then if they can't produce that anymore, well, what will I do?
Find somebody else.
Find somebody else to do it, and they'll jump right in. And so if you're in a position right now inside your company or inside your leadership journey where you have a recurring people coming in and out, you need to look in the mirror and see that, okay, I may be the problem. And I had to do that inside of our business. And in our business, we have different stores and different locations. And I've had to look at that and say, okay, what is some of this problem? And the problem always, as a leader, the problem's got to start at the top. And if you're in a key leadership position, you got to look in the mirror and say, what am I doing wrong? And how am I failing? How am I failing the people that are underneath my care? And I think if people really feel like they're being inspired and they're being motivated and you're working on the energy and the morale of wherever you are, I don't think you ever have that problem. Because my next point is, I was reading this chapter and preparing this, I think leadership is built, the basis of leadership is built through relationships with those that you lead. And when I say relationships, those relationships, now I want y'all to think about these words. A relationship has to be built on trust, on transparency, and on clarity. And those three things are, if you can look, Jed, you talked about some issues that you had had before.
Yeah.
If you don't trust the people that you are working, quote unquote, for, if you don't trust your leader, they're never going to fully be on board. If you're not transparent with them, not only about the direction of your company or whatever your division is, if you're not transparent with them, good and bad, where when it's good and when it's bad, that trust goes down. And if you're not extremely clear in your expectations and clear in your ability to be able to communicate with them, I think you're never going to reach that potential.
Well, there's an example in my department now. We have one person who is obsessive about details to the point that sometimes it slows them down a little bit. Other folks can call it slow. I like to call it deliberate. Sometimes, rare times, it's a little bit frustrating. Most times it's absolutely invaluable because he's not going to miss anything. He's not going to mess anything up. And it's going to be as perfect as we can. Nothing's perfect. It's going to be as perfect as we can get it every time. So when that person says, hey, I need a little extra time on this. Hey, I'm not quite done with this. Hey, I've got a lot going on. Do you mind if I do some of this from home? The answer is yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's fine because I know it's going to be right because I do trust him. And I think he trusts me enough to ask those questions.
Yeah.
Sometimes too, when you're talking about transparency, sometimes that's a difficult conversation to have with somebody because at the stores specifically, I would say over the last 2 years, there have been a lot of changes. We're doing things completely different than we were doing them when I even came 4 years ago. And sometimes that's hard for people that have been there for a long time to get on board. But if you have those conversations and you say, this is where we're going, this is why we're doing it this way, I really need, you are one of the most important people in this store, but I need you to get on board with the changes. Or it's very good that you won't be here to be on board with the changes, but you have to have that conversation and you have to be upfront and clear about that.
And Bonnie, I struggle. This is one of there will be many of these that we come to that I will admit my struggles. I struggle with the communication of and being crystal clear on changes. And here's why. And leaders, you better understand this about yourself and understand personalities and all of these other things that go into it. Because myself, I love the fire. And what I mean by that is when things change and when the frying pan gets really, really hot and a lot of people run from that, I like to run to the frying pan. When things get when things are just running really, really, really smooth, that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, I do like change. Change does not bother me. What I've had to understand and realize is almost everybody else is not like that. They don't like change. It makes them feel uncomfortable. And it's not necessarily the change. It is the fact that they don't understand why we're making the change and where this is taking us. I had a conversation yesterday, a long conversation with another team member where I had just completely not communicated well my intentions for something. And it didn't make this person just really anxious and kind of balled up inside, and it was affecting their performance. And I had to look and just apologize. Look, that's not what I was trying to communicate at all, and that was not my intentions at all. But sometimes we can make assumptions that people just understand. People, hey, I'm going to do this, and they trust me. We can take the trust for granted sometimes. Hey, they trust me, so I'm going to make these decisions, and they're just going to jump in line and follow it. Not understanding that, okay, this change that we're making is going to make people anxious. Mm-hmm. So I need to communicate these things, and I need to be able to be clear in this. And then the next two things that I put is you need to be able to listen to your people and understand them. Stephen Covey, and we may do this book later when we get through this, but the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of those habits is seek first to understand, then to be understood. And as leaders, if you're in a position, and especially if you have a strong personality, you can end up you can run right through that because you're moving so fast. You're not understanding your people. So understand where your people are before you try to get them to understand you. And that's where that'll affect them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
What you've probably felt that with me before.
I have. And it is also somewhere I struggle as a leader. Taking the time to really understand when somebody comes in the store in a bad mood or whatever, I'm like, look, I need you to lose the attitude and get out there and do your job. And then I'm like, you know what? They might really have something going on. Maybe I should pull them aside and have a conversation, understand what they're going through, and let's maybe give them a task to do or something that's going to make them more comfortable today, instead of just being, what is wrong with you? Lose the attitude, go do your job. Yeah, that is one place where I really, really struggle.
Because as a leader, it's not okay just to blast through people.
No, it's not.
You can, especially if you're super strong personality, and you can walk through life and you can leave a trail of bodies behind you.
And I have one of those strong personalities.
Yeah. So let's talk about not a particular person in per se, but probably everybody in an organization will deal with different kinds of people. And one of those kind of people is the person who has been there for a long time and has always done it that way. Okay. Is the right move just to say, all right, you're going to change? Because I know you've always done it this way, but you're going to change and you're going to get in line, or else?
No.
Okay. So you have walked through this.
I have.
And I have observed some of this. I have fallen into the trap of just, hey, this is the way it is. This is the way we're doing things. And so you either get on board or not. I remember one time you and I had a particular conversation, and I made the comment, and I was like, she just doesn't understand why we're doing it this way.
Which is why you have to have that conversation.
Yeah. She's scared. She wants the right thing for your store, but she doesn't understand how this new way of doing it is going to do it. You know what the problem with that, though, is everybody listening to this is probably going to say, well, I just don't have time. I'm so busy doing stuff that I don't have time to spend 15 minutes talking to this person and saying, look, here's why we're doing this. And I know this is uncomfortable. And I know that we've always done it this way. And that way seems to have worked. But here's the reason why this is the thing. And that's that piece of understanding. There's a conversation. I'm going to be having a meeting later today as we record this. That is one of my whole goal in that meeting is I want to understand everything there is to understand about this team member that is causing them issues. Now, those issues are manifesting themselves in a way that's unacceptable, but I care enough about them that, okay, I want to know, and going into it, you have to be open. It's like, okay, I want to know as the leader of this company what I have done and what kind of environment anything that would put this person in that position, as well as what you just said. You get into these things with your team. You got to remember, all your team members are people. They're not just. That's why we don't call them employees. You rarely hear that word ever come out of my mouth. We're a team. We're team members together, and those team members are people that have stuff going on. They've got stuff going on in their lives that all the outside stuff in our lives, they affect us in our work. So it's your job as their leader to, as much as they want you to be involved in that, to be cognizant of those things.
Exactly. And when I started having the conversation of this is why we're doing it this way, because the way we do inventory is completely changing, which is causing this. It's not that she doesn't want to do it. It's causing her high anxiety. Like, she's used to having 20 sizes of a 20 of a size of a particular pair of pants in her store. And the fact that I'm telling her we're only going to have 4 in the store at any time is causing her severe anxiety. But when I sat her down and explained the why, she's like, oh, well, that makes sense.
Well, it makes sense. And you think about why she wants to have those 20. It's because she does not want us to run out of those things. And she knows that's something.
She wants us to be able to sell them when a customer walks in the store. She wants us to have it.
She knows that's important to our mission in our company, which is we want to be able to provide the best customer service we can. And when someone comes in, we want to have the product. So she's trying to reach the same goal you are.
Right.
It's just a different way. And then it's like if you take the time, you see the light bulb come on. It's like, oh, well, that makes sense why we're doing that.
And since I've had the conversation that way, she's been a completely different person the last 2 weeks.
Yep. So influence, how do we build it? And what are steps? Every podcast, we're going to try to give you some things that you can make actionable at that time. So influence, it is built, and these are things that you can't fake these things. They're built through consistency in character and integrity of the leader. Can your team count on you? Can they count on you? I put a couple of things here, and I want to get your thoughts on these. Are you the compass that they can count on, that's giving the direction, the clear direction, that they can look at it and say, okay, this is true north. This is where we're going. And then as the leader, are you the thermometer or the thermostat? Now, what's the difference in that? What's the difference in a thermometer?
Thermometer tells the temperature and a thermostat sets the temperature.
So what's the difference in those?
The thermometer can only tell you what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
The thermostat can tell you what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm going to regulate this at this specific moment and set of characteristics.
Yeah. And you got to understand that your team, if you are the key leader, wherever you are, your team, they become more thermometers. That is, they're just telling the story of, okay, if Bonnie is leading her team, okay, is Bonnie having a really good day?
Right.
Is Bonnie on the how many of you have leaders on the warpath? Bonnie on the warpath? Well, then that levels down. Where if Bonnie's having these, what happened, with one person that you just mentioned that been a completely different person. So their temperature is right in line because Bonnie was the thermostat. Mm-hmm. You did what it took to get that person to that temperature. And that's a lot of responsibility. If you're listening to this, you're probably thinking, oh, man, these things are hard. I just want to tell people what to do and get them to go do it. Hey, we sign their paycheck. They should come in, work 8 hours, and do what we tell them to do.
Then you don't want to be a leader.
And leadership, again, everybody wants to be in charge till it's time to do in charge stuff. So what are your experiences? What's your track record? And that's the thing you've got to look at. Again, we said you'll be uncomfortable as we're doing this, but if you have a track record and some of your experiences are not the best, it's going to take a while to build that credibility as a leader to do those things. And it's okay. You want to be transparent in those things and give the clarity. And guys, you're the leader. You're the example that people will follow. So whatever you're wanting to be reproduced inside of your team, be that. Be the example for that. What would you guys say as we wrap this up? What other thoughts you got on influence?
It's a difficult thing to get your mind around, but everybody influences somebody. Mm-hmm. And you have to, if you're going to read the book, you have to look to the examples in this chapter of Mother Teresa was one of them, which is, it's a pretty neat story, but you can't rely on any factor of influence more than the others. You can't rely on, like you said, the track record, the history. It's an all-encompassing thing, and you have to work at every part of it.
One of the things I really try to work on, and having Jed in the store with me 2 to 3 days a week helps me realize when I'm doing it, when I shouldn't, is I really have to watch my tone of voice. your tone of voice can really set the mood for the entire day. And you don't want to be negative and set that negative mood. And I've said things before that I thought were perfectly fine. And Jed was like, you sounded really hateful when you said that. And I'm like, no, I didn't. And everybody's like, yeah, you kind of did. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's one place I know I really have to work on, is that the words that I'm saying aren't necessarily bad, but it's the way I'm saying it can really set the mood for the whole day and really just mess it up from the get-go.
Thermometer and thermostat.
Exactly.
Right there. All right. Well, we're going to wrap this thing up with what I believe is the most powerful thing he said in the entire chapter. And that is to intentionally add value to everyone you encounter. So you just think about if you did that this week with your team, with your family, with whoever, if you sought to intentionally add value to everyone you encounter, what do you think is going to happen to your influence if you do that?
It's going to go off the charts.
It's going to go off the charts because you realize every time I rub up against this person, I'm getting better. And that's one of the things that I've sought to try, and sometimes successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully, but I would love for it to be said that every person that I rub elbows with or I come, that they leave a little bit better and I leave a little bit better for that. So that wraps up our discussion on the law of influence and how you can put that into your life. We're going to be bringing you one of these every week. Again, get the book, listen to the book, read the book, make the notes, get uncomfortable with these things, and you will grow as a leader and become everything that you can be. And like we end every podcast, with your leadership, with your team, with all of these things, do the hard things today, and tomorrow will take care of itself.